Well, look at this. It's a Bridges of Meaning question and answer. After how many months in puppy prison? Someone, I thought this was someone in September. Where was it? September is half over. And then Jared, my son, dropped in the GIF. Mostly dead is slightly alive. Well, nothing happened in September. Goodbye, September. Puppy prison is forever. Well, the puppy is in prison over here at my feet, and the puppy is sufficiently schedulized now that the puppy should be able to sit in her little prison. And she's a black puppy, and I have her little kennel here covered. There's the kennel. I have the little kennel there covered, and so sometimes I look down there, all you see are little eyes looking up at me, but she sits there just good as gold, and got a little water dish in there, and got some toys to chew on, and has a nap. We get up in the morning and we play, and after we play, then she gets a little tired out, and I feed her, and she does her business. And you're in Discord now. I've got the Discord here, but I'm just, again, streaming this on StreamYard to my channel. Otherwise, Rick has to come in and we have to set everything up, and that's sort of a long deal. So I think I'm going to start with the freshest questions after I announce that I'm doing the Discord, and then I'll go back and hit some of the other questions that have been sitting there for a little while. And then we'll see what happens. If we have extra time, folks can come on the stream and ask questions directly, yada, yada, yada. Y'all know the drill. Okay, okay, I'll be doing Q&A October 19, tomorrow, October 19. Oops, I had the date wrong. It's October 20. What is your understanding of the relationship between humility and knowledge of God? I think in a lot of ways, the relationship is the same as our relationship between humility and knowledge of anything else. Part of the reason humility is so important is because it opens us up to disagreement. It opens us up to things. I just made a little 15-minute video right now on why I maintain the right to continue to be friends with anyone I want, including morally reprehensible people. I'll let that video stand. I'll play it at some point. So yeah, humility is the ability to be secure in yourself, to know what's you and not you, and then to not have idols of ideas and a bunch of other things. And yet at the same time, it's a really complex thing. On one hand, you don't have knowledge of ideas idols of ideas, because if you idolize certain ideas and they are threatened, you run into trouble, because now suddenly those ideas become idols, and you can't know the truth. So that's one aspect of humility. Another aspect of humility is security, where you know yourself enough so that you are not that idea, you are not that position, you are not that thing in the world. And I think actually being a Christian is super helpful with this, because finally, if you look at my sermon in Colossians, my life is hidden with Christ. What does that mean? It means Romans 8. There's nothing in this world that can assail me. They can kill my body. They can harm my reputation. They can kill, destroy things I love, things that are beautiful and true. But God is above all of this, and he is the judge of all creation. And in the end, what is right will be done with respect to me and with respect to everything else. And that both affords a radical humility and a radical freedom, where I don't need to be the judge of all the universe. I don't need to be the protector or defender of all the universe. That doesn't mean that there aren't arenas in which I must judge and defend. There are. But ultimately, God is God. I am not. I live and act before an audience of one, as does the entire world. And that affords humility. It affords security. It affords comfort. It affords joy. And so humility is deeply important for knowledge of God, because if there is anything, the most threatening thing in all of existence is God. I was thinking about reading through the book of Exodus with my men's group. I haven't done another commentary on the Exodus stuff. I will continue to do that. Again, I'm figuring out a way that I don't have to bump into Daily Wire copyright stuff with respect to that. But how can we not be terrified of a God from whom the mountains flee, and the great and the small of the earth cry to the mountains to fall on them, to hide them from the face of the one on the throne and the Lamb who was slain? So in many ways, if you can make your peace with God, which requires absolute humility, you can survive God. And it is not incidental that Moses, so we were reading Exodus 19, and God descends on Sinai, and there's earthquake, and there's fire and lightning and cloud, and all of this terror and glory and majesty and awesomeness. And God says, don't let anybody come near the mountain. And you kind of read the text, and it's like, I think everybody's running away from the mountain. And then have Moses come up. And you think, God sort of broke him in at the burning bush, where he had to take off his shoes because he was on holy ground. And then Moses has to go up the mountain into the cloud. And then later the text will say Moses was the most humble person who ever lived or ever will live. The Bible likes to talk in terms like that. But that's the only way you can survive God, is with humility, where before the face of God, you finally lay prostrate on the ground and say, I am nothing, you are everything. I only exist at your good pleasure. And anything beautiful or good that there is from you. And the beautiful thing about such humility is that opens up our hands so that God can fill them. So I think that's the connection. In what ways is only having God number one the arena like pantheism? Yeah, I think there's a relationship there. That is, I think, well, there's two aspects to that. One is, yes, God is arena, and even human beings can both be agency and arena. If you read The Cat in the Hat, a very famous story where there are two little kids in the home, mother went to work, and the Cat in the Hat bounds in with thing one and thing two, and the Cat in the Hat is bringing all sorts of chaos and disorder to the house, and the kids are freaking out because, what's going to happen when mother comes? Well, in that sense, mother is arenic, partly because she's tremendously agentic for the children. And of course, they eventually clean up the whole thing and the house gets put to right. And when mother comes home, everything is cool. But mother in The Cat in the Hat is arenic. Now, so that's one aspect of arenic. I think the key fault of pantheism is that it tempts human beings to step into becoming God number two. And you see this all the time with sort of new agey storytelling that, like Star Wars or James Cameron's Avatar. I've pointed this out in numerous videos. There's this point in Avatar where the god, who is just sort of a pantheistic god, begins fighting for all of the good, green, tall people with tails against the evil earth soldiers coming to obtain unobtainium, or whatever they called it. Silly. And they just can't hold to it. And it's the same with the Force. If the Force is impersonal, the personal wields the impersonal. That is the whole point of agency. And that's why if you only have God number one, you're sort of left with pantheism, and then humans slip onto the throne and trying to become God number two, and human beings make terrible gods. And so what we try to do is level up ourselves with magic or spirituality or technology or something like that so we can be gods, and then we just reap more destruction on the earth. So yeah, I think they're very much related. See, I'm trying to be better and, keep my answers shorter. Do personality types factor into your Calvinist understanding of who believes? Oh, I think so. In other words, does irresistible grace work in such a way that the elect have a representative spectrum of personality in all of humanity? A little bit of a fun question, not entirely serious. I think okay. I've mentioned some of these things numerous times. Well, why not mention them again? Richard Mueller, an expert, a world-known expert on Calvinism, wrote a paper presented at Westminster Theological Seminary, Was Calvin a Calvinist?, in which he pretty deeply differentiates 16th from 17th century Calvinist theology. I think you can understand a lot of Calvinist theology, which has tended to be the theology that today is most often connected with sort of low resolution takes on Calvinism, to have been deeply impacted by deism and sort of a mechanistic mindset. Luke's going to love this. Instead of a relational mindset. Yeah, Luke says, Luke says, I'm a one-point Calvinist, irresistible grace. Yeah. Perseverance correlates, right, Luke? And actually, these 5 points of Calvinism really do fit together. And they all have to do. I often say that the 5 points of Calvinism are sort of like 5 fingers, and the palm is grace that holds them all together. And I think part of, let's say, if you look at Luke's trajectory, is Luke has much more of a relational approach rather than a mechanistic approach. And all of this determinism that Calvinism tends to be read through, all this mechanism, this gets into the whole pantheist problem, because in many ways, mechanism is like pantheism in that it is impersonal. It's all this cause and effect. Relationality and the spirit of finesse are vastly more complex, vastly more nuanced, vastly more flexible. And I think, and sometimes people will say, well, you're not really a Calvinist. No, I subscribe to the 3 forms of unity of the Christian Reformed Church. I'm just not a deist or a machinist. I'm a relationalist. And I think if you understand God and humanity like relationship rather than mechanism, I don't think you will have the same kinds of issues with these 5 points that you have if you understand the world as machine. So clearly there are personality types, but we should be also a little careful with personality types, because personality changes as you go through life. Personality can change markedly with big transformations like conversion. So again, just like we tend to approach this theology like mechanism, sometimes people approach these personalities like mechanism. The reason that pantheism fails, and the reason that impersonality always must bow to personhood. And personality is, in fact, a spirit of geometry and a spirit of finesse. Persons have in them the image of God, which is just, so again, you can quibble with this translation, but the book of Ecclesiastes, God has placed eternity in our hearts. We surely have a bunch of mechanistic cause and effects things, but we cannot be reduced to that because we are made in the image of God. And God certainly can't be reduced to that. And that's why I have no problem with spending eternity with God, because if God is bottomless, well, then you can never exhaust God in time. So, yeah, but at the same time, even this label Calvinist, it has some utility. Calvin himself would have hated it, just like Luther would have hated Lutheranism. I think Jesus has to tolerate Christianity because he's God. So, and you know, Luke said, no, it wasn't Luke. It was Sam said something to the effect of, or maybe it wasn't Sam. Someone said something to the effect of, every time you say it's Calvinism, I say it's Christianity. And when you say it's, you know, and that's, of course, my view on Christianity has been deeply shaped by my experience in the Calvinist church, that is the Christian Reformed Church. So I'm not wedded to Calvinism. I'm wedded to Christ. But I think Calvinism is something fun to play with, and I think it can be a useful way into a community to understand people who have been formed by that community. But yeah, and personality types, and that those personality types usually go for good or for ill. Our personality types, just like I love the way John Vervaeke talks about relevance, realization, and bias, that these are two sides of the same coin. Personality types are the same way. There's all upsides and downsides to all of this. So, will the 49ers win the Super Bowl? Probably. I think so. I think they will. I think they're the best team in football right now, especially if Christian McCaffrey, who is my running back on my fantasy on the Peterson Pitbulls, my fantasy football team. And so my friend Reggie seeded his great draft spot. And so I was able to pick up Christian McCaffrey. He's injured. I hope he plays this week. He usually gets injured during the season. That's the reason people sort of pause to draft him, because you get some great weeks out of him, but then he gets injured and then you miss him. So, but I'm the number 2 team in the league right now. I'm playing my oldest son this week. He's the number 1 team in the league, but I've got more points scored total. I think I can beat him. ESPN projections put me higher than him. I'm hoping for the Calvin Cup this year. Or is it the DeWitt Cup now? I forget. Or the Schuler. I think it's the DeWitt Cup. All right. Are there any bucket list projects that you hope to take on in your coming days, either professionally or otherwise? I'd like to write a book at some point, but I think that's probably going to have to wait until retirement. My father wrote his memoir of sorts in retirement, which Chad bought. Chad was fortunate that he found one of the hard copies in the used book market. There aren't that many of them out there. You can buy the Kindle version and read it. And it's the book could use a good editing. And I said, that's a project. I'd like to edit my father's book, because it could use some editing. I think if the book were about half as long, it would be more readable. And so it's nice to sort of have both sides. So there's some things like that, but you know what? I think the whole bucket list framework is flawed, in that when we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we're going to have plenty of opportunity to do what we will never be able to fit in this world. So books to write, books to read, saints to look up and chill with and discuss with. And I mean, part of the most frustrating thing of my whole YouTube internet journey is you're all way more interesting than I will ever have time to know. And so this dispensation of limited space and time, I sort of reacted to Konstantin Kissin's response to kidology about, knowing that death comes really heightens. Yeah, it can. And there's value in that. But also knowing that we will have time in eternity to enjoy one another because God is bottomless and we will never exhaust him. God as arena is bottomless, and that while arenas have in some sense always a boundary, there is a sense in which God has none. And so a sense only. This stuff gets so complicated. All right. So yeah, maybe a book. I've had a chance to, and part of it is I'd love to see more of the world. But again, read C.S. Lewis's The Last Battle, because what they discover is that the world read The Last Battle and read Isaiah 60. And you can look at Richard Mouw's take on Isaiah 60 as a little book on that. There was a friend of mine who was dying, and he didn't want to die because there was so much in this world that he was like me, and that was very high in openness, and he loved food, and he loved friendship, and he loved travel, and he loved movies, and he loved opera, and he loved music. He loved all these things. And so he didn't want to die because he loved life so much. And I told him, I said, you don't understand. You're going to all of the beauty and glory that this world has generated in culture, Christ redeems and brings into the new heavens and the new earth. And so even though I haven't had a chance to visit China, I will visit perfected China. And even though I don't have a chance to visit all kinds of places in history, we will see perfected history. And once you have a vision for this, you can't but just long for the life of the age to come. So that's, in many ways, that's what I want for people. My version of evangelism is partly that, helping people. I think once people get a sense, our imaginations are so poor. I spoke with Neil Plantinga, this was a number of years ago already, and I hope he manages to pull it off. He was going to do some writing about the age to come, and there are a few people as smart or articulate or as good a writer as Neil Plantinga. I hope that's Alvin Plantinga's younger brother. I hope Neil manages to do this, because I think, 40 virgins, a vision of 40 virgins does not, when sort of framed in sort of an avaristic sexual framework, cannot compare to just the inkling of the vision that C.S. Lewis gives in The Last Battle. So, yeah, long for the age to come. Fear not this world. Live for Christ. It was so much fun when in my conversation with Damian Walter, many people asked me this. He just articulated it very clearly. They're sort of waiting for me to sort of unveil my project. And this is part of the reason I resonated with that Ross Douthat conversation that I posted this morning. I don't have a project beyond Christianity. It's all there. Just discover what's there and go into it. And if orthodoxy is your door into Christ, go in. If Calvinism is your door into Christ, go in. If Catholicism is your door into Christ, go in. If, just go in. I mean, if you're in the hallway, good, but there are rooms with fires and snacks and meals and conversations to enjoy. Get out of the hallway and go in. Valerie, do you or John Van Donk have any estuary community stuff that we can add to the Writer's Meaning anthology project? Ask Van Donk. Van Donk is a writer too. Van Donk has succeeded in finishing more writing projects than I have. He submitted a number of, for a while, he was submitting a lot of pieces to the Banner. Van Donk's a really good writer. So hit up John Van Donk. Part of the reason I do videos is I'm so ADHD. Yosef's question. I haven't got, did I skip Yosef's question? It's coming up. There's an order here, Luke. I know you don't like order, but Yosef's question is coming up. So hit up Van Donk on that. And would you or Van Donk like to write something about Estuary? John Van Donk would definitely love to write something about Estuary. Now, I'm not going to say too much about this because John and I actually talked about this yesterday, but there's developments in the estuary space, more leadership, more organization. It's developing because, as many of you noted, 3 years ago, people were like, oh, you need to start this or that. Rick sent me a message. Oh, it's not about this. Everybody wanted organization about 3 years ago. And my take on this is my particular posture, generally speaking, doesn't mean I won't break from it for things. My particular posture is, generally speaking, structure follows function. So get the functioning up and running, and then create structures to support, enhance, magnify, sustain, secure the function. And so now that Estuary is running in a number of places in the world, and we're continuing to learn about it, John Van Donk has been sort of personally carrying a lot of this stuff. Now we're getting to the point of some institutional development. And so as that develops, more things will follow. And I think we will see, once we have an organization and more volunteers, I think we're going to see Estuary kind of begin to hit a next level. But all of this takes time, and I'm very patient with this stuff. So I'm super happy with the timing, actually. I think the timing is exactly right. And I think over the next year, we're going to see some new developments in the estuary space that is going to make it larger and more available and continue to broaden and deepen and perfect it. So we did the Estuary Protocols video in the Estuary playlist plus Estuary Hub to the community page. Good. And actually, after this live stream, I'm going to make a video with John where we're going to talk about 3 pipelines into estuary. So another estuary video is coming. When you talked about poetry, you mentioned rap music, which I was glad you mentioned it because it's ignored often like an elephant in the room. Yes. And, Freddie, there's not enough poetry on my channel. If you think that, you're missing the Freddie and Paul show. Freddie does poetry every week. He does. And in yesterday's episode of the Freddie and Paul show, Freddie made up a song right there. Now, it might not be your taste in songs. You might think, and to anybody who says, well, it could be better, my challenge is then do it better. Write poetry, write music, write story. So yeah, rap music is a huge area of poetry currently. In poetry, to me, you have something like T.S. Eliot or Dante, who's heady and thinky-talky, that it becomes almost disembodied. Where, on the other hand, you have rap music, which I suppose too much body and not enough mind, or those two strains came through together, I feel like something powerful would be reborn. And I think there are people who are playing in that space. You know, the guys who are doing the Arkansas event coming up that we did a video on, the Convivium event. I opened my Chino talk with popular poetry, Billy Joel, popular poetry for people who are old like me. Billy Joel, Dan Fogelberg, Bruce Springsteen, Bob Dylan. This is poetry, and it's set to music. And in a sense, poetry set to music is, just look at, so in a very low resolution way, orthodoxy is about liturgy, which is a form of poetry. Catholicism is about the Eucharist and the liturgy around it. Protestantism is about music, hymnody, Christian contemporary music, and preaching. And so they kind of have these two poles. Kind of have preaching, which is very propositional often, and then Protestant liturgy, which is mostly music, which is poetry, and popular music and popular poetry. And that goes all the way back to Luther. You sing "A Mighty Fortress Is Your God." If those two strains came together, I feel something powerful would be reborn, a true poetic spirit. How would these two worlds be reconciled? Well, artists will do it, and it will happen because it continues to happen. And then it's sort of a process of discovery and cultivating one's ability to enjoy it. Say that. Yeah. White people have no rhythm seems to scream out to me when discussions of high and mighty poetry take place. Good question, David. All right. I'm at Joseph's. Luke, William Cooper. There you go. I'm at Joseph's question. Does Jesus propositionally know everything the Father knows at all times and understand this knowledge to the same degree as the Father? I don't know. How am I supposed to know that? Does he say he does? There are hints in the Gospels where, for example, Jesus says, only the Father knows the time and the hour. There you go. Christians have long understood that in the incarnation of Christ, there was a degree of limitation that Jesus embraced. Christians have long said that. But to answer specifically your question, how could I know such a thing? Again, there are hints in Scripture about, I think Jesus sometimes is surprised and delighted. I think part of incarnation and, okay, well, let me take the Dorothy Sayers tack on this. Dorothy Sayers writes herself into the story. The character in the story, in order to operate within that arena, is going to have certain self-embraced limitations. And I don't think this is hard to understand. Let's say you're playing a card game. So I'm holding cards and you're holding cards. Now I can easily reach out and take a look at your cards. Why don't I? That's a self-imposed limitation. I can just grab your cards and look at them. Or you're playing a card game with cards face down and cards face up. Well, you can flip over the cards. Why don't you flip over the cards? Does that mean you are limited in your agency? No, you're fully capable of flipping over the cards. But in order to play the game, in order to fulfill the role, you take on a degree of self-limitation. So maybe that was the case. I don't know. Is Paul's understanding of Jesus and theology as complete as humanly possible? I doubt it. part of participation in God in this arena is that limitation. And I think we do so because the reason we keep some cards face down is because we want to experience the thrill of the game and surprise. And so there are places in the gospel where Jesus expresses surprise at the faith that this person has, like the centurion. Centurion sends his servants to talk to Jesus because he has a beloved slave who is a Jewish slave. He has a beloved slave who is ill, and he would like Jesus to heal the slave. And Jesus says, okay, on my way. And the servants, and no, you don't need to go. If you have the power that I believe you have, just say the word. And Jesus says, I've not found such faith in Israel. Okay. You might say, well, if Jesus is God, then there is nothing he couldn't find. What you find is that the Lord in the Old Testament plays the same game. That's the whole point of the sacrifice of Isaac. At the end of that chapter, now I know, and it's like, that's where sort of the Greek omnis come rushing into the fore, where how could God not know? Well, how could I leave cards face down on the table? Because I want to. Because I want to be, when I'm playing a board game with my children, I want to be surprised by the great turn of events. I don't think that's beyond God. And the theology that we do, even though we have canon, Christians continue to write theology as they should, as they must, as do Jews. Paul didn't exhaust theology because I don't think theology can be exhausted, because God cannot be exhausted. So, for instance, if Paul fully an Orthodox Trinitarian, Lou Smedes, in his books on union with Christ, he has both a large book and a small book, basically suggests Paul is a binitarian, that Paul very much sees the divinity of Christ, but his theology of the Spirit might be a little deficient. So is Paul sufficiently Trinitarian? First of all, God is the judge of Paul, not me. But I will say that as someone far more theologically astute like Lewis Smedes had his suspicions about Paul being a binitarian, which of course, binitarian makes no sense. Yeah, if the answer is yes, why are Christian writings after him not Orthodox Trinitarian until the end of the 4th century per Sam's wonderful reason? I'll give you the answers that I was given in seminary and then go from there. The doctrine of Trinity is found in Solution, and I made a video about this, actually, about Sam's thing, that theological discovery is not flat. It is unfolding. And just because, theology continues to discover truth as history goes on. And I think that's clearly the case with respect to Jesus. I mean, you can make the same argument as to why were the disciples so clueless before Pentecost? They had Jesus right in front of them. You just read the Gospels and they're just clueless. They're just hapless. And you might say, well, they've got the fullness of revelation of Jesus right in front of them. Why isn't it until the Spirit comes that they are filled with boldness, that they are filled with knowledge, and the whole point of it is that they begin to reflect on what Jesus has said. And I think that's a human function that now I'm 5 years into looking at the work of Jordan Peterson and John Vervaeke and Jonathan Pageau, and it regularly happens. This morning I was listening to the excellent conversation between Ken Lowry and John Vervaeke and DC Schindler about Hegel, who Hegel is so hard to understand sometimes, all the time. I don't know a lot about Hegel. And so they're talking about Hegel, and it was really cool. And it regularly happens that John Vervaeke will say something that he's probably said dozens of times. Oh, and now I get it in a way I didn't get it before. Okay. It's like that being a person. So that the church, over time, reflecting back on the revelation of Christ and the writings of Paul, comes to a fuller understanding that Paul himself could have. In fact, almost all of New Testament, not almost all, a lot of New Testament reflection on the Old Testament presumes this. David, speaking as a prophet, says, it's like, David was a prophet? Why in the New Testament does David get to be called a prophet when that wasn't what he was in the Old Testament? So I think human learning is like that. And fortunately so. As we grow, as we ponder, and Vervaeke talked about this a little bit, as we continue to do theology together, we grow. That doesn't mean that canon is insufficient. It doesn't mean that canon has failed. It just means that the church continues to grow. Now, that's scary because where there's growth, there's heresy. And that's why I say heresy and orthodoxy sort of co-generate as history goes on. And often orthodoxy comes after heterodoxy. Heterodoxy is, of course, multiplicity. It's chaos. It's diversity. And then as the church sort of fights and as conflict and cognates, it sort of begins to settle on orthodoxy. And I think the Trinity is an example of that. All right. Happy Friday, Paul. Dave, here it is. I'm following your studies in Romans. Do you feel that Paul's description of man's nature, relation to sin, etc., are hard to understand because they are not at the highest level of resolution in terms of his language as they could have been? I don't know if they could have been more, but again, with respect to sort of this, this whole talk about progressive knowledge is difficult because there's also a cumulative forgetfulness. And you hope that the progressive knowledge outruns the cumulative forgetfulness because there's sort of an opponent processing. So we know things that Paul couldn't have known. That's just the way it is. But yet Paul knew things that we don't know. There's so much. There's an interesting irony in history that the more you know about someone, the more you realize your ignorance of that person. And that's just sort of a general fact about knowledge in the world. And I've mentioned a number of times, I've been married to my wife for 35 years. The more I know her, sometimes the more I realize I don't know her, because the more I know, the more I realize how much I don't know. Neil deGrasse Tyson said something basically the same thing, that the more we learn in science, the more we learn we don't know. In that way, knowledge is like an expanding sphere. And as the surface area grows, the frontier of knowing and not knowing also grows. So that's why we continue to read old books, because we actually do continue then to learn about the past. And that's also why it's helpful to read old books, because that diversity helps us know more today, because it actually brings a fresh light on today. So And that's why we do theology. If so, do you think Paul would be surprised or concerned that his epistles have been collected together and placed in commensurate level with the Old Testament? It's really hard to sort of, I mean, academically, we kind of, so there's VMware. Some of you, there's a lot of techies out there, you know what VMware is. VMware is on my Windows machine. I can create a virtual Windows machine. That is a separate machine. So if there's some software I want to run and I want to sort of sandbox it off from the rest of my operating system, I'll start a VMware machine and I'll run that virtual machine. We sort of do that with dead people like Paul, and we sort of spin up in our imaginations an imaginative Paul to sort of run the software to try and figure out what Paul would say. That's a perfectly legitimate mental move that we make. But we always have to remember that that little VMware version of the Apostle Paul is always probably mostly our projection of him. And just as my wife, who is available to me, is more mysterious in that the more I know I don't know, Paul would be the same thing. And it's also the case that we are deeply embedded in our contexts. That this point was made in the first Jurassic Park movie, where, okay, so you're going to take this dinosaur DNA and you're going to add some frog DNA and you're going to make these dinosaurs and have them run around. But the plants, the biome, if you could reconstitute a T-Rex today, it would not be a T-Rex of the Jurassic period because the context is different. A lion in a zoo is not a lion in Africa. The context is different. Yeah, you kind of make the surroundings, yada, 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 but context matters. And this is part of the, sort of the defeat of modernity, that modernity sort of believed, I'm going to isolate Paul with my monarchical vision and mind read him. Perfectly legitimate move. But you have to know the limitations of this move, and those limitations are your knowledge of him. So, all right. Peter P. Oh, Peter asks such hard questions. Paul, would you mind spoiling a few of your thoughts that preoccupy you with regard to Breakwater? I'm giving the first talk, which is a little daunting. Giving the first talk is always hard. It's a lot easier to, Pajot made the same comment that Chino. It's a lot easier to follow because when you give a following talk, you can begin to calibrate your talk to the spirit that is always emerging. So giving the first talk is difficult because it's difficult. So part of the reason, so I fly out of California on Monday, and because of the way time zones work, I arrive in the Netherlands on Tuesday, and I have Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday in the Netherlands, and then we travel to Germany. And I know just by experience that even if I imagined I would write my whole talk for Breakwater, it would get changed. Because I remember last time being in Europe, being in that change of context. Wow. It was so fertilizing. I was just so impressed by the depth of culture and beauty and difference. And that's such a low resolution apprehension that you have at first. So the talk will continue to evolve until I give it. And then the talk always, I'm a preacher. And what that means is, there's this old saying, if you want to, the best question you can ask about a talk you're going to give are questions with respect to the audience of the talk, because a talk is always a dialogue. And so for that reason, I usually have notes, and I usually have sort of a set of things that I'm going to go through. But after I've spent a few days in Europe, so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be reflecting on this on the airplane, because there's lots of time to reflect. I'm going to be reflecting on this. I'm going to be talking to Cassidy and Ferdy. I'm going to be staying at their home. I'm going to meet Eve over in the Netherlands. I'm going to meet Aaron. Aaron's another speaker. He and I are going to start getting some dialogue together about things. Hopefully I can see Job. If some of you want to connect, we're talking Amsterdam on Wednesday and maybe The Hague on Thursday. And those would be like a meal together or something where we meet at a restaurant. And I hope to do some touring to see some of The Hague and see some of Amsterdam. I didn't see Amsterdam or The Hague at all last time. So hope to see some of that. And Aaron and Eve are sort of in charge of the Netherlands portion of that. And so connect with them. You can find them on the Discord server, I'm sure. So, but that's very much going to, if you look at the talk that I gave with the New World podcast last time, I mean, so much of that developed in those first 2 days of having John Van Donk drive me all over the Netherlands and eating raw fish. Yeah, so hard to know what'll bubble up. Do you sometimes feel some kind of split between the things that keep you busy in life as well as intellectual between the upcoming events that you have prepared for? Or is there no big difference between that and such things like rough draft for Sunday? Well, it's a really good question. So having this trip ahead of me, I always dread the trip beforehand, which is crazy because once I start the trip, I know I'll love it. But I dread it beforehand because all of the stuff in this world has to be sort of put on hold. And so that's a pain. Okay, I got to make sure my bills are going to be paid for the next 2 weeks. There has to be pulpit supply. The garbage has to be taken out at Livingstone's. The dog has to be taken care of. Oh, why am I going on this trip anyway? Do I have the right luggage? Am I going to have the right clothing? Like the last time, I'm going to pack super light. So I'm thinking I'm only going to take one pair of shoes, and that pair of shoes has to both look good enough so that it doesn't stand out when I'm doing work on stage, but also be comfortable and athletic enough to do all of the walking that I'm going to have to do in the Netherlands and in England. So I've just got all these details. And then I've got the talks, and the talks are weighing on me. And so I'm always sort of churning them in my mind. It is a lot like rough draft for Sunday. So this Sunday's rough draft is going to be a lot of, and some of you who watch the rough drafts, you'll notice, boy, a lot of the videos he did during the week, there's connections between that and the rough draft. There always are. Oh, she's dreaming right now. She's barking in her dreams. There always are. So these talks become cumulative. And so sometimes I regularly get messages from people. I don't understand how you can do everything you do. Years ago, I learned most of the preparation for a sermon does not actually happen just in those hours that I designate as sermon prep. They're in the pastoral care. They're in talking to the homeless guy. They're in watching TV with my wife. They're in chasing what is of interest to me on the internet and in books. That is how, in a sense, God speaks to me through these avenues. Scripture then is sort of this, what's a good analogy of it? It's sort of this thing that connects them all, and it goes through, and then talks come through there. And that's part of the reason that I could make 10 times more videos than I make. And in a lot of ways, the number of videos I make probably impedes the growth of this channel because I make way too many videos. It's way too chatty. My thoughts are way too disconnected. It's all rough drafts. But when I give a speech, I try to give something more than a rough draft. So there's another level of polish that I try to put on talk, even though once I'm giving it, once I see who's in the room, I will start to change some things. And if you want to see that, watch the rough draft and then watch the Sunday morning sermon, because you can see the change. Now, some of that change happened between. After I give a rough draft and I stop recording, I pause and, oh, I hate my rough draft. Anne Lamott has a book on writing where she talks about shitty rough drafts. And that's true. You give a rough draft and, oh, I hated that. But hating that helps me. Okay, what did I hate about that? What needs work? Am I going to have time to work on it? So then Sunday morning, I get up early and I work on it some more. And then I preach it. And then even after I preach it, it's like, well, there it was. Sometimes I preach twice. I get to preach a sermon again, so then I can refine it a little bit more. So, all right. This is asked by Grim Grizz, has knowing Grim Grizz caused you any pause in your worship of set or your internet or your Netflix consumption? It's probably given me some protection against mind control. Almost all of my set consumption is done in a family context. A lot of it is with my wife. And it's not so much, most of the stuff I watch on TV, I don't really care much about. What I care about, I mean, it's like, I've watched The Bachelor and Bachelorette and Love is Blind, and I've watched all these shows. I would not watch these shows on my own. I watch them with family members because I want to watch the mind control on my family members. And I want to give them some savings throw against the mind control. So, and that's kind of the same for when I do movie reviews and movie analysis of on my channel, because I'm much more interested in watching what this is doing to people than in the thing itself. So now, Grim Grizz, you've colonized me about as deeply as anyone over the internet, I suspect. Whenever the YouTube algorithm now knows, whenever you're live streaming, if I turn on something, boop, Grim is live streaming, and I always try to catch the Grim Grizz live stream. And there's so much branding. I've seen all the branding, so I usually fast forward through the branding, unless there's new branding, and then I watch it. And but no, I think Grizz and Chad with their channels, I think, even though I think in some ways you have to get into set if you're going to defang it. You can't defang a serpent from outside its mouth. And when I look at what Grim and Chad do, they're doing like I'm doing. And Kale sent me a note. I should maybe I'll read this note, because Kale, I hope you don't this is what he sent me. He says, sometimes I get the sense that my new job in life is to somehow make Grim sensible to more people. Sometimes I watch and think, what the heck is he doing? I think that too sometimes. Then, just as I'm about to click off, he does something that is just so dang insightful, if not a touch too esoteric, just amazing and frustrating. And I said, that's exactly the way it is. And, again, this video that I just made about, doggone it, Someone might say Grizz is dangerous. Yeah, so is Set. I live with them both. Someone might say, oh, look what Jordan Peterson tweeted. I don't really care. Well, I do kind of care. I do watch. It's data. These orthodoxies on the internet are more ferocious than the kinds that I've seen in the church. It's amazing watching the dogmatism and the orthodoxy and the cancel culture. Again, I grew up in a church that was full of, not my local church, but a denomination that was full of this stuff. And when I watch it on the internet, it's like at a whole new level. And I think, no, I'm going to watch Sam. I'm going to watch Grimm. I'm going to watch Luke. I'm going to be friends with all these heretics. And I'm going to be friends with even worse heretics. Because, again, and on the internet, this one piece of the conversation with Ayla and Louise Perry on Unheard, well, maybe prostitution on the internet is a bit safer. Yeah, that's true. The John ain't going to beat you up through the screen. Actually, I think Ayla is incredibly brilliant and insightful, even if I don't think she's begun to recognize at what cost she has purchased her insights. Anyway, the internet is amazing. The internet is hell. The internet is glorious. The internet is terrifying. It's all true. And, when at the end of my talk with John Vervaeke Chino, he expressed such surprise and delight, and some of us thought, this is what we're doing. And we don't always know what we're doing. This is what we're doing with Estuary. This is what we're doing with live streaming. This is what we're doing with our little channels. Yeah, first rule, don't get famous. It's a good rule. It's a good rule, Corey. Or at least don't get too famous. You need to be famous enough. You probably are. Yeah, that's right. Safe for who? Yeah. So, I think part of the reason that some of us have been around this little corner for 5-6 years and we're not going to quit is we've discovered something that really helps. And we have discovered a degree of freedom. I clipped it for Twitter. DC Schindler was talking about Hegel's definition of freedom. It was really cool. We've discovered a degree of freedom. We've discovered friends. Now, I regularly have people who check out. And as with church, when they check out, they slam the door. And it's hard to hear the door slam on the internet unless they have their own channel. And there's only limited channels. So what they usually do is send me a message that they are checking out and they're slamming the door. And the thing is, almost all of the little tricks that are done on the internet in this kind of context, I have seen them all and lived them all in church. I've watched people leave church and slam the door theoretically on the way out. And I've lived through that. And so now when it happens on the internet, it's like, in real life, it's so much more consequential. On the internet, it's like, all right, we won't be hearing from Carl for a while. A few years from now, if we're still here, we'll probably check it. And that's exactly how church is. Someone leaves the church angry. 3-4 years later, they just kind of sheepishly come in the door wanting to know if anybody's going to smack them. But no, not in my church. We're not going to smack them. We're going to welcome them back in because all the reasons they got angry before were in them. It doesn't mean that there weren't things to be angry about, but if you're triggered, 80% of those triggers are in you. And so when you come back, I'll still be your friend. Did you cuss me out? Yeah. Did you try to destroy my reputation? Yeah. Did you do whatever you could to destroy any of the work that I do in this world? Yeah. Welcome home. This is where you've always belonged. Joy. This talked about coaching. This is a considerate take. So it would be the ideal fusion of thinky talky and too much body. What would that look like? The mediation between the full disembodied and embodied. Yeah. And now when we start putting together the opposites, like in opponent processing and such, glorious things can happen. Grim Grizz, I recently found Revelation 3:21, and I shall give to him that shall overcome to sit with me in my throne, as I also overcome and sat with my Father on his throne. And I found it terrifying. Pardon me, but when people quote scripture at me, I've got to look at it myself. There was a great, it was a video about Sam Harris that it was Roadshow Apologetics about Sam Harris. It was an interesting video, but it was a little too Christian-y for my taste. Let's see. Revelation 3:21. I got to watch my buttons here so I know what I'm doing. Oh, to the one who is victorious, I will give the right to sit with me on my throne, just as I was victorious and sat down on with my Father on his throne. Whoever has ears to let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. Yes. Yes. So Grizz, you were reading. I can pull up let's pull up the RSV. Maybe we should read more context. Oh, this is to the church of Laodicea. To the angel of the church of Laodicea write, to the words of the Amen, the faithful and true witness, the beginning of God's creature. I know your works, you are neither hot nor cold. Would that you were hot or cold. So because you are lukewarm and neither hot nor cold, I spew you out of my mouth. For you say, I am rich, I have prospered, I need nothing. I know that you are wretched, pitiable, poor, blind, and naked. Yeah, they've lost humility. Humility is thinking that you are full. Therefore, I counsel you to buy gold from me, gold refined by fire, that you may be rich, and white garments to clothe you and keep the shame of your nakedness from being seen, and salve to anoint your eyes, that you will see. Those whom I love I reprove and chasten, so be zealous and repent. Behold, I stand at the door and knock, and if anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come to him and eat with him, and he with me. He who conquers, overcomes, conquers. He who conquers, I will grant him to sit with me on my throne, as I myself conquered and sat down with my Father on his throne. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. Yeah, that's a great verse, Grizz. That's a great verse. I love it when Grizz reads the Bible on his live stream, especially the book of Revelation. This is why, and so part of the blessing of the internet is that the internet rewards people like this, the bad and the good. You know, Andrew Tate is an extreme character. Donald Trump is an extreme character. Jordan Peterson is an extreme character. Grim Grizz is an extreme character. Luke Thompson is an extreme character. That's why we watch them. And I think when it comes time for the Feast of the Lamb and we look around the table, the Bible says this, we will be shocked at some of the people that are there. And we will be shocked at some of the people, sorry, Luke, who are not there. Jesus says, don't be a wimp. Go for it. Be careful when you go for it, that you go for it and love. It's all these diverse excellencies that Jesus holds together that we struggle with. All right. Michigan Sam. Well, I'm sure there's something interesting, thinky talky stuff there, but to get the real important stuff, how's the puppy progressing? I just looked down. She looked up at me. You can't see her. All you see is this little eyeball. because, puppies sleep with one eye open. Puppy's doing well. This is a very active puppy. And so you go to some of these puppy training classes and you've got some of these dogs that are just good as gold. And our dog has to learn restraint. Our dog is not the Church of Laodicea. But she's my wife. I had a council meeting last night, so my wife had to go to the puppy training class by herself. And said she was a star. And she is. She's super smart. She's an outstanding dog. And I think someday she's going to make someone a terrific service animal. It's interesting looking at these service animals. It's so analogous to human service too. Being a service animal for these dogs is so costly. I told this story before. My friend Rod, he has a sister with cerebral palsy, I believe, and she's had a series of service dogs. And so when she has to get up out of a chair, out of bed or something, she calls the dog and she says, brace. And that dog kind of becomes a movable brace. And so she puts all her weight on that dog to lift herself up, to get herself out of bed or out of the chair. And her old service dog, was having health issues. And so they brought the dog in for x-rays, and they discovered that the vertebrae on that dog's back was just all messed up. It was just all full of arthritis because all of the years of bracing for her. And it almost makes me want to cry. And the godful service that dog provided, the selfless service that dog provided. They had to put the dog down, but they loved that dog. You find pictures of that dog because that dog gave its life so that she could live. And so I look at our little puppy, and on one hand, we love this little puppy, and we probably love on this little puppy too much because, I have a large family. When everybody comes to visit, they're always excited to see her and fill her with love, and on and on and on and on. And we hope that she will, once she goes into the professional training, that she will qualify and graduate and serve someone. But part of me would want nothing but happiness for this little dog. And what I know and what you learn when you train a dog is that training a dog isn't about necessarily making the dog happy. It's about helping the dog achieve the dog's potential. That's the same with people. It's that verse that Grim just had me read. God disciplines those he loves. Why? To help us achieve our potential. In the cross, Christ achieves his potential for us. What crime did you commit ending up in puppy prison? I volunteered. That's the crime. No good deed goes unpunished. For we do not wrestle against black shirts and pump arms. Are you a cat person or a dog person? I like them both. I probably prefer dogs because cats are fun because they're smart, they're mysterious, they're coy. I remember Mary Cohen once. Mary, boy, do I miss her. Mary Cohen. Wouldn't it have been amazing to have Mary at Chino? Would have been amazing. And again, this is why I'm a Christian. I'm going to see Mary again, and I'm going to meet Mary's family, and I'm not going to meet. I'm going to meet the Mary that the cancer perfected. I met the Mary that the cancer tried to debilitate. I'm going to meet the Mary that the cancer perfected. And I believe in the age to come, our perfection will continue. We don't just sort of hit it and then plateau. I think we go further up and further in. But what was I saying? Oh yeah, Mary had this saying. You talk to a child, boys are dogs and girls are cats. So that little child sees something into dogness and catness. Dogs are very agentic. Part of what I love about dog, and what's fun about dog training is it is just, so part of the training is I have to take this little dog out into stores and things. And so she is super cute. I know all people say about their children, but this dog is super cute. And then we put this little vest on her, this little cape on her, which says that she's a service dog. So hopefully people will behave around her, which they seldom do, because she's super cute. And she just walks into a store and people are just amazed. They're like, wow, I wish my dog would do that. I wish my dog would do that. Well, your dog could do more of that, but the dog will require training. And I think about the beginning of the book of Job, where the Lord says to Satan, what do you see? You know what people are like. God says, have you considered my servant Job? Job was perfected through those trials. So yeah, cats are cool. I love cats. They're fun to play with too, and you can train cats to a degree. I used to train my cats to play fetch. And some cats will do it. But dogs, wow. Dogs are great. Dogs are great. Oh, good. I was afraid we'd have too many questions. Oh, that's right. I'm supposed to go back. Oh, we'll see what I do. Are you still listening to Shad? Have you listened to Shad? I would recommend Rose Garden and A Good Name. I haven't listened to Shad. I don't even know who you're talking about. I recollect seeing this, and you very well may have mentioned it, because I know you, Sam, and who you are, but I haven't. We're just talking with each other here on the Discord. No question today, but thanks for doing these Q&As again. I really love them. Look for a good question next time. Curiosity gun. Hey, PVK, this may come off as a shot across the bow. I love those. But have you ever seen synagogues from the Second Temple period? Namely, Dura Europos, or they're littered in an Old Testament littered with Old Testament iconography. It makes iconoclasm of the most modern Abrahamic faith seem stranger to me as a recent Orthodox convert. I have not seen it. Yeah. So part of what sort of bedevils biblical studies is archaeology. Because archaeology, on one hand, can confirm a whole bunch of things, because the Bible is coming out of its context, but the Bible also has an agenda. And human life is so diverse and so complex. And part of what's difficult about this is that so there's all the data, and then there's interpretation of data. So I'm reading this book. I'm reading my second book on UFOs. And I know once Grim Grizz hears this, he's going to be all excited, because I'm trying to figure out how to think about UFOs and this whole phenomena. And so Cal recommended a book, American Cosmic, to me, which I'm reading and finding fascinating. And at some point, I really want to make some videos about UFOs. All right, this is going to be the last of this bunch, then I got to go back. How do you balance Luke 16 and Matthew 6? Well, Luke 16. He also said to his disciples, there was a rich man who had a steward and charged him. Oh, Luke 16. Oh, yes. Yes, Luke 16. Yeah. How do I balance them? I don't necessarily try to balance everything because, again, this idea of opponent processing is really helpful because opponent processing is not necessarily balance, but rather finding optimal grip. That's what it's about. It's about optimal grip. And Luke 16, read Kenneth Bailey's take on Luke 16. Luke 16 is this radical. Luke 16 is a lot like Revelation 3, like what Grizz just read. Luke 16 is the story of an embezzler. And again, this is why I love morally reprehensible people. Sometimes gotta deal with them carefully. Luke 16 is a story about an embezzler, and he's ripping off his master, and he's caught. Now, anyone who understands what embezzlement is knows that the first thing you do when you catch an embezzler is you take away the account book. And the master doesn't do that. And the embezzler doubles down. He says, I'm too proud to beg. I'm too lazy to work. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the account book and I'm going to reduce the debts that are owed to my master by some of his big debtors so that when I finally am fired, they will welcome me into their homes. And you think, what's that about? And because he didn't take away the account book, and then the master comes and says, boy, I admire you. Like, what? What do you mean you admire him? The thief just stole more. And Kenneth Bailey's take on this is what the servant counted on was the master's zeal for his glory. And so he applauds the servant. And I think that's very much what's happening with the church in Laodicea. And Luther says it, if you sin, sin boldly. Don't play coy. In many ways, playing coy with God is a bigger insult than being a horrible person. Why? Because at least being a horrible person understands and respects God in a way that the person being coy and duplicitous and lying towards God doesn't. And for that reason, again, it's amazing how many times Jordan Peterson tweets something on Twitter and someone basically sends me the tweet and says, now will you stop talking about him? I laugh. I just laugh. No, I'm going to talk about whoever the heck I want to talk about. Just like Jacob can say the most horrendous things about Calvinism and about Paul of Tarsus and about all of these things, but I'm not going to stop being Jacob's friend because of it. I'm not. They might say, well, that's dangerous. Yeah, it probably is. But I'm still going to be his friend. And it's the same with, and again, part of this has been born out of being friends with homeless people and addicts and people who have done the most horrendous things. Shouldn't you stop being their friend because they're a bad person? These are the same people that are skeptical about hell. And it's like, don't you get it? Don't you understand what life is like? Oh, I get a kick out of Jordan Peterson's Twitter persona too. Oh, hey, There's Daijin. Yeah, his voice went up 1 octave. Yeah. Oh no. And Jesus says these kind of things all the time. The parable of the talents. The 10 talent guy, the guy who risked everything and brought back 10 talent, I'm going to give you much. The guy who played it safe. So now I got to be careful with this, because it's relevance realization. You should figure out what you should play safe with and what you shouldn't. Don't be risky with other people's lives. Be risky with your own. Yeah. All right. Let's see if I can find some old. All right. Here's some old questions. Generically speaking, how did listening to Tim Keller help you? I was at a point, because of some things in my life, where I had to surrender I seemingly had to surrender all of my earthly aspirations. And what Tim Keller helped me see was that my life was hidden with in Christ with God in heaven. And that no matter how badly I screwed things up or people attacked me, that in Christ I could be safe and I could be found. And that could give me a freedom to not have to not be defensive, to not have to justify myself. That's always a thing, that struggle. You get attacked and you get defensive and you want to justify yourself. And there are times to defend yourself, sure. But Tim Keller and his version of Calvinism just really gave me a vision for God's glory and his power and his grip on me. I always tell people, your grip on God is nowhere near as important as his grip on you. And of course, that makes people nervous, because, again, my definition of a Christian is someone who trusts Jesus more than they trust themselves. So, and it's really scary to know that God's grip on you is more important than your grip on God. What's scary is because we trust ourselves more than we trust God. And that parable of Luke 16 is exactly about the crooked embezzler, in a sense, trusted his master more than he trusted himself. And the master recognized that and applauded him for it. So Tim Keller helped me see that in a time in my life where I really needed to see it. And the thing about trials and adversity, they can strengthen you in a way that good fortune never can. Pastor Pablo, I have a suggestion. Next time, next year, make some videos ahead of time and program them to release for your summer break. Yeah, I do that. Oh, the withdrawal is hard on me. Anna. Yeah, and it's going to be interrupted now with a trip too. I'm sorry about that. I've done that in the past. And what that means is that I sort of, I really can only have time to make 1 or 2 videos a day. Absence makes the heart grow fonder. I hope in Europe to have, so I'll be staying with Cassidy, and I'm sure she has a decent internet connection so that I'll be able to upload videos when I get to her house. I haven't done a lot for the membership channel yet. When I get back from Europe, now that the puppy is sort of under control, then hopefully I can give especially the supporter level, the attention they deserve. give them some more access to me. In January, when the adult Sunday school class ends, we'll see if that end is permanent, because if the Sunday morning Estuary thing fails, I'll probably go back to Sunday school class. But I've thought of, for a long time, I've wanted to do an online Bible study, but that might be a pay-to-play thing. That might be a certain level of membership to get the link for that and participate in that, because that's more of a commitment thing. I don't want a Bible study which is sort of like this, where anybody just strolls in and trolls with a question. I want a Bible study where people know each other and are committed to each other. And that's part of what having a degree of ownership via a financial commitment sort of helps put in. So we'll see what I do. My parents and their 3 children are spread across the country, separated by flights or drives of a day or longer, and my siblings are all happy with the places we've moved, but miss our family being together in one place. And we hope to all get us all living in the same area soon. Yeah, that's been a dream of mine. You also moved cross country in pursuit of a calling, but away from your family. How do we balance heeding God's call to strange new lands, away from family, Abraham, and keeping the family together geographically, as is the case for most people in all of human history until now? Given the cultural consensus on individualism and finding yourself, should we consciously and counterculturally pursue the latter by default? I often feel these are the same forces we are tearing apart the CRC and American society, just on a small scale. Yeah, you're dead right. I wrestle with that. So my father died quickly. He had a heart attack and died. Bang, right there. My mother is in her mid-80s, and she's very healthy and very sharp. And she'll say she doesn't have the strength she used to, which is probably true. But as a pastor, I am with people who die slowly over a decade and need a lot of help along the way. And if my mother comes into that kind of situation, I'm going to have to make some choices. My wife has a job here, and in a lot of ways, her retirement depends on her doing some more years in that job in terms of what life will look like in retirement. We're in the part of life now when we're thinking about that. These are hard questions, John, and I really wish I had a better answer. Part of me wishes I lived in a place with all of my kids around me. My kids are all on the West Coast right now, which is nice. But I think a calling is enough to go and do something. Is a job enough? I don't know. It's a great question. Hey, Paul, have you ever felt the imposter syndrome? Oh, yes. The imposter syndrome. Oh, I'm going to this art conference and I'm so feeling it. I go to a con. Fortunately, I don't have to speak, so that's good. And I go to a conference like this, and for me, the great thing about a conference like this is networking. I'll get a chance to meet some people that I've probably been watching online and would like to meet them. So that'll be cool. But I so feel the imposter syndrome often. I when I do stuff with Peugeot and Vervaeke, I often feel like, I don't deserve to share a stage with these guys. These guys are brilliant, and I'm just a pastor. So yeah, I feel it regularly. Why does this feel like everyone has a problem? Why does it feel like everyone has a problem with Christianity? Did we do something wrong? I'm sure we always do things wrong. I'm a Calvinist. Religion trades in ideals, and Christianity sets the bar astoundingly high. We're always going to fall short. We're always going to fall short. Think about the disciples in watching. Actually, they ran and hid. Thinking about the disciples being in hiding when Jesus is being crucified. The church will struggle until Christ returns. And we will too. Strange theology. Peter. Is Jordan Peterson preaching utilitarian gospel? Yes. The Bible and Jesus help us to make sense of life and order our society without an intimate connection to its redemptive work. I think that's the summary. Yeah, I think that's right. And that's been true all along. He's sort of had an Augustinian anthropology and a Pelagian soteriology. But again, Jordan is an extreme guy. I loved the interview with Piers Morgan. He asked him a question, something like, how would you evaluate yourself? Something like that. And Jordan looked at him and thought for a minute and said, I'm a bit much. Yes, you are. You are a bit much. And I love that about him. And so this gets into this diverse excellencies thing again. And Jonathan Edwards pointed this out. Jordan Peterson is a bit much. He is. And so there's part of that muchness that is so the servant, the crooked embezzler in Luke 15, part of the reason the master applauded him was he was a bit much. and Jordan is. And so, but there is a truth that often can only be revealed in someone who is a bit much. And so with Jordan, we get this, and it's fascinating. Then the conversation with him and Michaela and Piers Morgan was fascinating too. Michaela is an interesting person. I mean, talk about, she's got a father like Jordan. I don't know Tammy as well, but you can get a sense of Tammy sometimes through Jordan. A mother like Tammy, and then you've got a life-threatening, debilitating disease that forces you to go on an extreme diet. And then your father and your mother is healed by a miracle, and your father is at death's door for how long? And you're renting their, and it's just like, Michaela is a chip off the old block. And sometimes you get the sense, yeah, she's a bit much too. But there's something in that which is really revelatory, and rightfully so. So, just let them be who they are and enjoy what you can from them. People people on the internet, they want to establish an internet church, and it's just like, it's just foolishness. It's just foolishness. All this monks and knights, this little stupid game. It's crazy. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for it. I'll post the question in Christian general discussion. I've got a buddy that says the Trinity is entirely unbiblical. Is that true? No. Just as has been said many times, you'll hear it by Trinitarians, the Trinity is found in the Bible in solution. The tells are there, and in time the church realizes it and confesses it and professes it. Where did my MOOCs go? La Familia Bazzani says. Yeah. Oh. Well, baptize them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. To me, if someone pushes me for a proof text on the Trinity, that's where I point. And that's in the That's where I point. But why would you baptize them into the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit if not for the Trinity? Oh, that's interesting. Oh, sorry. I'm amazed and baffled by the outside's vitriol directed at Michaela online. It's true. It said most, and that's almost what this stuff does. All right, I'm sick of hearing me. All right, I got all the questions through. Good. Now we're gonna play. I can only play so long. Let's see. There it is. Ugh. Man. There's the link. There's the link. Come on in if you want to. No, I love doing these, and it was very frustrating to come back from my summer trips and have this puppy derail my schedule. But this is something my wife wanted to do. And, I love y'all, but I got to put my wife ahead of you. And so, there were surprises when you take on a new commitment, but at the same time, this is what life is like. So we have a puppy. Oh, here comes one of my friends. People say, don't let him on your channel. They're probably right. How you doing, Jacob?
I am doing okay. In the name of is a specific Hebrew. It means with the intention, and things are done in the name of in Judaism all the time. Which is why in, I believe, Acts, it talks about the baptism of John. And so people were also baptized in the name of John the Baptist.
Sure.
So unless you're going to add him to the Trinity, I don't see that as a good explanation.
No, but it's remarkable that that anybody would be put next to God. All right. I do not want to get derailed in arguing about the Trinity.
This is why I stopped.
Those fights.
This is why I stopped.
Sam Yeats, welcome.
Yates, thank you.
I don't know if I've had you on the channel before.
No, never before. I've left a comment or two here or there, but never been on in person at all.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm professionally, I'm an archaeologist, which if you've met any field archaeologists, you would know that we talk shop way more than we should, and probably being an archaeologist is way more of our identity than we should. I live in Wyoming. I'm from Iowa City originally. Moved out west because I went to grad school at Utah State, which led to me meeting my now wife. And then she was living in Sheridan, Wyoming at the time, because she had a job waiting for her there. So I moved over there with her. There's 3 different companies that do archaeology in Sheridan, if you can believe that.
Wow.
So I knew I'd be able to find a job. More recently, we've moved over to the Bighorn Basin, which is some would say the most Wyoming part of Wyoming.
What kinds of archaeology do you do?
So mostly what drives private sector archaeology is energy development and public land usage. So a lot of the projects I've been doing lately, we will survey the like National Forest Service land, or I'm working on a project right now on Bureau of Land Management land. That's the BLM for everybody. That,
I know.
not the BLM, not BLM, but the BLM. So they'll do like projects to clear deadfall, to mitigate against wildfires and that kind of thing. And so we will look for archaeological sites prior to them doing activities that might disturb such sites, so that we can identify what's out there, what's important, recommend ways that damage to the sites can be mitigated. And so we'll look at everything from Paleo Indian stuff, you know, which is like people hunting mammoths, all the way to like pioneer cabins and historic buildings and stuff like that.
So cool. So cool. How on earth did you find this little corner?
Well, I have been paying attention to it. I was in grad school when the fabled Jordan Peterson status rocket occurred, which corresponded to me working on my thesis, which involved cataloging 3,000 some pieces of bone from a rock shelter. So I had a lot of listening to do while I entered, you know, items into a gigantic Excel spreadsheet. And so I was paying attention to that, and I grew up a Methodist and still attend a Methodist church. Only person in my generation, I think, to still do that. But anyway, while he was doing his biblical series and everything, I was the whole time thinking, boy, it sure would be nice if like a pastor or somebody like that would engage with this, you know. And my grad school research, a lot of my focus was zooarchaeology. So I'm really looking at what prey people are hunting, and I'm thinking about what choices they're making for what animals they're going to decide to hunt. And, you know, it's all grounded in evolutionary theory applied to human behavior. So his very evolutionary reading of the biblical corpus was, of course, interesting to me. And I felt like I had the educational background to engage with that side of things. And it would be like, oh, it'd sure be nice if somebody with a theological background could weigh in on some of these interpretations that I don't, you know, the other side of things that I'm way less educated in. And it's like, wait. And then finally you popped up. So I think after your first video, I've been paying attention to what you had to say.
Well,
And
thank you. And you've been here ever since.
Yes, I have.
Oh, wonderful. Well, did you jump in today because you had a question, or you just wanted to take part in it?
No, I just thought I'd jump in. It seems like you always do these things, and I'm always out in the field or whatever. And I'm kind of waiting to get told that I need to go help work on the house. Because we're in the process of building a house. And
oh, cool.
I'm kind of twiddling my thumbs just at the moment. So
All right.
I thought, why not? And then I didn't know that I was going to be here for more discussion of Trinitarian theology.
Yeah,
as
yeah.
popular as that topic seems to be.
That's what Sam's channel is for, and Jacob's sometimes. So, Cale, how are you?
Doing well, Paul. Good to see you.
Oh, it's good to see you.
Yeah, I just wanted to pop in here. I'm between classes. I'm about to go off to practice. But I just want to say hello. I hadn't seen you in a while, and I've been listening to you a ton, as always. And I'm glad you're reading American Cosmic. I'm pretty pumped to see what you can sort of weave together, because my mind was going, I think, in at least 3 different directions with it. All of them having some interesting crossovers. So yeah. I'm really looking forward to that. And two more things. Second thing, you did a video on a kind of snarky British millennial woman a couple of weeks ago, or Cop or something like that.
Yeah, Hoop.
And I'm shocked that you got blown up for that. I thought you handled it extremely well. And I think if you're gonna jump into the arena, then you have to be able to take the shots. I thought you were fair, and I think you were right. I think you were really right in terms of your analysis. You were asking all kinds of questions about the frame, and of course, those seem to be the most difficult questions for people to actually kind of ask and see. So anyway, thought that was great. And then finally, your Ayala and Louise Perry stuff has been fantastic, and my mind has also been going quite a bit on that one. So I really appreciate what you're doing there. I don't know if you got any bad feedback on that, but I think you did a similar kind of mode on that, right? Really poking people in their axioms that are almost always unspoken. The kind of that default frame that I think you're very good at pointing out. So I just wanted to thank you, and I can't wait to talk to you soon. So
all right, good, Cale, good. Tayo, how are you? Uh-oh.
Oh, yeah, I think I'm back. Hello?
Yeah. How are plans for my UK trip shaping up?
That's why I came on. It's looking good. We've got Oxford, Edinburgh, and London. You'll be based in London because that's where the conference is, and that's where we find accommodation for you during your time. But yeah, you probably have to get a train to Edinburgh.
That's fine.
And if someone wants to drive to Oxford, that offer is available, but otherwise that will be another train trip for you.
Okay. Yeah, somebody from the ARC conference wanted to go to Oxford and was thinking of renting a car, so I might be able to grab a ride with him. So, but no, that sounds awesome. Thank you, Tayo, for arranging some of that stuff together.
Yeah, it's been fun. The PVK London trip is shaping up nicely.
Good. Well, I look forward to it. We'll see what happens during the ARC thing. I hope that I'll have some time. I might do some Estuary type debriefs at the hotel in the evening after the conference if people want to. Maybe I'll just jump onto Bridges of Meaning and add an area there to coordinate some of that stuff. I don't know. I was thinking about either that.
John Lomge is actually going to be. He said he's working at the conference, so
okay.
He'll be attending as well. And he also suggested for anyone interested in the London area to come into the pub after the conference, because that's people will from the conference usually go to the pub to hang out, and you can network and meet people that way.
Sounds good. Well, I place my life in your hands, and I'm in good hands. So thank you, Tayo. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Paul.
If I might ask Samuel, you went to University of Utah and you were doing Native American archaeology. I'm guessing you've gone into some of that LDS stuff. That's a big thing with the LDS.
Yeah, so I went to Utah State, which is a little north. University of Utah is in Salt Lake City, and I was up in Logan, Utah, which was a huge culture shock for me because it is extremely Mormon up there. I think Cache Valley is like 95% Mormon or something, way more Mormon than Salt Lake is. And, it was really interesting suddenly finding myself a minority in a kind of a strange way. In terms of the way that they study Native American stuff, didn't really get into that at all. In classes I had that were cross-listed with undergrads, there was certainly some of that where you would get definitely some undergrad comments that you could say, oh, this is coming from a very Mormon sort of background. But of course, as I think is kind of the case with schools everywhere, the faculty isn't really from there in any way. Just in the most general sense, we had people that were generally from out west, but not like even from Utah necessarily.
Yeah, when you said most of it is funded by like search for energy and stuff. All I was thinking is, oh, the Mormon Church was spending lots of money on archaeology for a long time.
Okay, interesting. So yeah, they were probably funding their own. I'm sure they're funding their own researchers. Our clients are really energy developers that need to stay in compliance with federal regulation for how the permitting works. So the feds really want to see that kind of due diligence is being done. And the way an energy client can go about that is they can say, okay, your archaeologists can handle it, and we're willing to wait for a federal timetable to get that done. And of course, nobody that's trying to get a project done is going to want to wait on the feds to get that figured out. So they'll hire a private contractor, and then we report to the BLM archaeologist in the district.
So what got you interested in archaeology? Why did you decide you want to become an archaeologist?
Oh, I've been interested in archaeology, I guess, since I was a kid. My dad was a big history nut, and I'm very interested in history, but I always found the most interesting parts to be the stuff that's kind of off to the side of the page, or where areas that there's a couple confusing messages, confusing statements, and you don't hear anything else. And I thought, how do you learn about that kind of stuff? And for that matter, when I learned more about what private sector archaeology is like as a job, you basically get to hike around and look for stuff, which I love doing. I love being in the outdoors, working outside. So it's a job that gets me hiking all over the place. Wyoming is just a wonderful place to work in that regard. Like I saw 4 bighorn sheep yesterday, which is pretty cool.
Wow.
And then in the wintertime, I get to write reports on what we found, so it can keep me busy year round.
Very cool.
So it's definitely turned into more of a little more of a career than in terms of a workaday job than it is in terms of, I'm doing research. Exactly. But it's a pretty enjoyable way to make a living. I have been able to write some reports on some cool rock art sites that we've had, which are interesting because you do get to look into some of the ethnographic folk tales and myths. And like there's a story of in Crow legend of these 2 characters, Spring Boy and Lodge Boy, that are like they're hero twins that are they're separated at birth, and then they meet back together, and one of them's like a shape changer, and they go on these adventures. And I think it's Spring Boy is the origin of is supposed to be in some ways the teacher of the Sundance. And we were finding a lot of depictions of him in the rock art, which is really cool to be able to see something like that carved into a rock, and actually, rather than completely wondering what were these guys doing, to be able to connect it to ethnography is a rare cool thing to do.
Very cool. Yeah, I love the rock art. The Canyonlands, Utah, Wyoming. I mean, just beautiful country. Beautiful, so much country.
Yes.
Beautiful.
And are you familiar at all with that Dinwiddie rock art?
I looked at when I made a trip a number of years ago with only kid left in the house, and we looked at a bunch of stuff, but that name doesn't newspaper. Yeah, so it doesn't ring a bell.
Okay, you see it throughout the Great Basin, but also up here, and it's these big big, like often like hollow-bodied monster looking
Yeah,
animals
yeah.
with like weird interior lines and like really prominent feet.
Yeah.
And we have a ton of that up here. And one of the guys I have the privilege of working with a little bit is a big expert on it and has actually talked to the some people that actually would go to those Dinwiddie sites for spiritual purposes. And so there's just like the very end of that tradition still exists. And it's very interesting in that it's very serious stuff.
Yeah.
You know, ethnographically, like you don't leave anything at a rock art site because things might come back to you. Yep, that's totally what I'm talking about. Exactly.
That stuff is so wild. Just
And
prompt all the UFO ideas too. You know, you look at these creatures and it's like, this is wild stuff.
yeah. One thing I guess is a lot of it, the ones with horns are actually potentially mouth parts of beetles.
Huh.
Is one conjecture. But the idea is that these things do are like interdimensional in some way, and a lot of the time you'll see like a weirdly foreshortened or elongated arm coming out of like a crack, because they believed that these entities were coming out of the cracks in the rock. And then there's other ways that it's really similar to stories you'll hear about like somebody stepping in a fairy ring, disappearing into the, you know, the fairy world.
Yeah. Like
you'd hear in you know, Ireland or British folklore. So that's currently my thing I'm kind of interested in. We're hoping to write a paper on some of this stuff as winter comes, if we're not too busy.
Well, we're almost out of time, Grizz. What do you got to say for yourself? What do you think?
I'm outraged.
You're outraged. Why are you outraged?
You completely dodged my question again, but it's going to be so long before there's a chance for me to hold you to task for it. I thought I needed to come on and do it now.
What question did I dodge, Grizz?
Like I told you I was terrified of this throne line in Revelation like 3:21, and you basically stopped at 3:20. But this whole notion of like, I will let you sit on my throne, and that notion is like nothing I've ever heard from Christianity before. To those that overcome, you can sit on my throne with me, like I overcame and sat. Like that's what is. Talk about imposter syndrome. That throne, like what even is that throne?
Well, think about this one of these last scenes in Lord of the Rings where everyone bows down to the hobbits, and think about have you read the Narnia Chronicles, Grizz?
Not enough to have it in memory at all.
You should read the Narnia Chronicles, and you could do whole series and grab all kinds of nerds on your channel from that. It's children's books, and I'm sure you'd find plenty to be offended in them too. So,
but what is that to you? What is the sitting on his throne like he did with the Father?
Well, we will. I mean, it's consistent that in the we will reign with him over the new heavens and new earth. That goes all the way back to Genesis in terms of our role having dominion over this earth. So it's a restoration theme that the original vision will in fact be reclaimed, renewed, restored, and even improved upon.
Well, if that's what we're destined for, I've got a lot more self-shaping to do that I wasn't intending, and thanks for hitting that part though, because that was the part that was sticking with me, and you kind of missed it during the Q&A. Thank you.
I'm sorry I missed it. All right. I am about out of time. I have to take the dog outside to do her things before I have to do something with the Van Donk. So thank you all for joining me here. Jacob?
I have something to push, Fountain of Comfort.
Fountain of Comfort.
Yeah. We're gonna have to talk about that sometime, because I incorporated it in everything. So yeah.
And Bruce, you want to say something, Bruce? We're not getting any sound from that big beautiful mic you've got.
I can't read his lips either. Yeah.
Nope, we're not getting any sound from you. All right. Okay, everyone. Thank you for joining today. And I hope we'll see what happens. So when I come back in November, I'll of course have stuff waiting for me from the 2 weeks that I wasn't here. Hopefully I'll be able to do another Q&A. When I come back in November, I have to do some things for the members too. And so we will see, but hope those of you who are in Europe, hope you come to the Breakwater Festival in Germany. And I think it'll be a great time. And as Freddie says, see you on the flip side.
Thanks, Paul. Just want to say hello.
Oh, now we can hear from him. Hey, Bruce.
Yeah,
all
thanks.
right.
I just want to say hi. I was in the hospital for a long time. I never get a chance to join these, so I found it.
Oh, no. What were you in the hospital for?
It's very complicated. I was diagnosed with Sweet syndrome. It's a really rare condition.
Oh, my.
But I'm recovering providentially, doing great. So,
Good.
But I just want to say hi.
Good. All right. It's good to see you, Bruce.
Thanks for the good work.
Good to see you too, Jacob, and everyone else who jumped into the stream. And I will end transmission now.